The night sky above the alien forest was filled with silver clouds that drifted like ghosts through the branches. The air was thick with the smell of damp soil and the distant cry of hidden creatures. And in the middle of this wilderness stood a single human, surrounded by small alien cubs, who clung to her legs with trust in their wide eyes. The human was calm, while the cubs whispered in their soft voices a word that made the hidden hunter shiver. They called her Pack. From the shadows beyond the firelight a circle of predators watched, their eyes glowing like coals, their blades drawn and ready. They were hunters of many worlds, their claws sharp and their hearts cold, and they had come to taste human flesh. Yet what they saw before them did not match the stories they had heard, for the human did not look afraid. She stood with her shoulders steady, while the cubs pressed close, as if she were their own blood, as if she had always been theirs. The predators exchanged glances in silence. They knew fear and they knew courage, but this was something stranger. The cubs should have scattered at the first scent of danger. Yet instead they moved closer to the human and whispered again, "Pack." The sound was soft, but it carried through the night like a drumbeat. Steady, clear, unbroken. The hunters felt it in their chests, and they did not like it. It was the kind of word that made prey dangerous. The forest around them seemed to listen. The trees creaked in the wind. The ground shifted as though the soil itself wanted to remember this moment. The human lowered herself to kneel among the cubs. She brushed a hand through their fur and whispered something they could only hear. And the cubs answered with laughter that was not nervous but proud. Their voices carried the same word again, "Pack." The predators shifted their weight, unsettled by the unity they could feel in the air. One hunter leaned forward, his jaw tense, his fangs ready. He had fought humans before on the edge of war. He remembered the way they never gave up, how they stood again even when wounded, how they dragged others with them toward survival. But to see this lone figure accepted as family by cubs of another species was something even darker. It was the kind of thing that hinted at danger far greater than claws or teeth, for this meant humans could make allies anywhere. The fire cracked in the silence, sparks rising into the dark sky like fading stars. The cubs clung tighter to the human. She whispered once more, and they raised their heads, their eyes reflecting the glow with determination that no cub should have. It was as if her calm strength had flowed into them, as if her spirit had become theirs. The hunters above the ridge shifted again, their claws dragging lines into the stone. The silence was no longer theirs. It belonged to the human and the cubs. The hunter leader finally spoke in a growl that shook the air, his voice full of disbelief. Prey does not command loyalty. Prey does not lead. His words made his followers uneasy because they too felt the truth of it. The human was not standing as prey. She was standing as the center of a bond, a circle that included her and those small creatures who called her Pack. And if they attacked, they would not be striking down one body. They would be striking an idea that could not be killed so easily. The human turned her head slightly, her eyes catching the glow of the hidden hunters, and for a moment the predators felt exposed, as if she had seen through the trees and shadows, as if she had known all along that they were there. She did not raise a weapon. She did not bare her teeth. She simply placed her hand on the smallest cub's shoulder, and in that gesture was a warning stronger than any blade, a warning that said, "If you come closer, you will face more than me." The cubs pressed closer, their voices in unison, "Pack." The sound rolled like thunder through the forest. The predators drew back without meaning to, their hearts uncertain, for never had prey spoken through others. Never had prey been shielded by those who were supposed to scatter and cry. The leader narrowed his eyes and forced his claws tighter around his blade. Yet even he could not deny the weight in the air, a weight born not of fear, but of belonging. The silence grew heavy as the human rose again, her form outlined by the dim fire, her eyes cold but steady, her body still but ready. She said nothing, but the cubs spoke for her, chanting again and again the word that made the hunters hesitate, "Pack." The sound was alive. It grew stronger each time, until even the trees seemed to echo it. The hunters felt something unfamiliar inside themselves, not hunger, not rage, but doubt, and that doubt was poison to their courage. One predator shifted forward anyway, unable to bear the tension, his blade gleaming, his growl low. He thought he would end the silence with a single strike, prove that humans bled like any other prey, prove that words meant nothing against true claws. He took his step, and the cubs lifted their small arms like a wall. The human did not move back. She stepped forward instead, slow, steady, unbroken, and her voice whispered one single word that no hunter could mistake: pack. The forest itself seemed to lean in, waiting. The hunters gripped their blades tighter. The cubs clung harder, and the human stood like a shadow that would not fall. The night held its breath, for everyone knew the next move would decide far more than one life. It would decide whether the hunters had just found prey, or whether they had stumbled upon something the galaxy was not ready to face. From the jagged cliffs above the forest, a line of hunters stood in silence, their bodies covered in dark armor made from the bones of beasts, their eyes glowing faintly in the dim light of the twin moons. The blades in their hands reflected the silver sky like restless serpents, and though they were masters of countless hunts across uncounted worlds, none of them moved to strike, for the scene below was wrong. The scene below was strange. The scene below carried the kind of weight that made even predators pause. They were creatures born of hunger and blood, shaped by wars older than human memory. Their clans told tales of endless hunts where prey screamed and scattered. Their children were taught that the galaxy was theirs to consume. Yet tonight their sharp ears heard something that shook even their ancient pride. The alien cubs did not cry. The cubs did not flee. The cubs clung to the human and whispered with steady voices the word pack. And every time the sound rose, the hunters felt their resolve bend. The leader of the hunters crouched low upon the rock, his teeth grinding as he studied the human with narrow eyes. His memories swirled with old war chants of his people, chants that spoke of prey breaking under fear, prey tearing itself apart in chaos. But the human did not break. She did not tremble. She stood among creatures not of her blood, yet closer than kin, and the firelight turned her figure into a shape that seemed carved from iron. Her stillness was louder than war drums, and that stillness unsettled him. Around him the younger hunters whispered, their claws scraping against the rock. One asked if humans were truly what the stories claimed. Another asked why cubs of another race would call a human family. Another said perhaps the cubs had been bewitched. Yet each voice was heavy with doubt, and doubt was poison to predators who lived by certainty. The leader hissed at them to be silent, but even he could not drive the unease from his chest. Even he could not deny that the sight before him was unlike anything he had seen. The forest below seemed to listen too, its ancient branches swaying without wind, the ground vibrating as though it remembered older truths of unity and survival. The hunters were used to prey bending to their will, but now it felt as if the forest itself bent to the will of the human, as if even the soil recognized her as the center of something greater. The cubs were no longer just cubs. Their voices were threads that bound them to her, and through those threads a net of strength spread wider and wider. One hunter, younger and reckless, shifted closer to the cliff edge, his hunger louder than his caution. He said he would leap and prove that humans bled the same as all prey. He said he would silence the strange chant with one strike of his claws. His voice trembled with both eagerness and fear. The others hissed warnings, but the leader only watched, for he too wished to see what truth lay hidden in this strange bond. And so the younger hunter crouched, his muscles tense, his breath heavy, ready to leap into the firelit circle below. But before he could move, the human lifted her head, her eyes turning toward the cliff, as though she had always known they were there. Her gaze pierced the dark like lightning, and the young hunter froze. The word pack echoed once more from the cubs, and it struck him harder than any blade. His body stiffened as the chant filled the air. He tried to leap, tried to move, but his own heart betrayed him, for the sound carried weight that made his claws shake and his courage falter. The leader narrowed his eyes, for he saw the weakness spreading through his ranks, and weakness among predators was death. He growled low, reminding them of who they were, reminding them of the countless hunts they had won, reminding them of the stars they had burned in their conquest. Yet his words felt thin, his breath felt empty, because the cubs below did not waver. The human did not break, and the fire kept burning as though no storm could touch it. The hunters shifted again, but none took the leap. None wanted to be the first to test this mystery. Whispers began to move among them like restless snakes. Some said humans were cursed. Others said humans were chosen by forces older than the stars. Some said that if cubs of another world called a human pack, then perhaps humans were not prey at all. Perhaps they were something else, something that could not be hunted, something that could not be silenced. The whispers grew louder until the leader slammed his claw into the rock, silencing them for a breath. Yet even his authority could not crush the unease that lingered like smoke. Down below, the cubs tightened their small circle, their voices rising in unison. Pack, pack, pack. The word became a rhythm, a beat that seemed to shake the air. The human placed her hand on the ground as if to anchor herself, as if to anchor them all, and the flames of the fire rose higher with the chant. The hunters felt their own breaths grow shallow. They told themselves it was only coincidence, only tricks of the eye and ear, but deep inside they knew it was not. Deep inside they knew something larger was moving here. The leader's thoughts wandered back to the war fronts of old where humans had fought in forgotten battles. He remembered stories, carried by warriors who never lied. Stories of humans who refused to fall even when outnumbered. Stories of humans who stood side by side with strangers and made them stronger. Stories of humans who turned enemies into allies and allies into family. He had dismissed those tales once as exaggeration, but now as he watched the cubs cling to one human with absolute faith, he realized the stories had not been lies. They had been warnings. A growl rose in his throat, low and uncertain, for he understood what the others did not. If a single human could be called pack by cubs not of her kind, then humanity carried a power far beyond sharp claws or strong weapons. Humanity carried the power to turn fear into belonging, to turn strangers into blood, to turn prey into unity, and unity was the one force predators could never shatter. He clenched his blade tighter, but the sweat on his palms betrayed his fear, for he knew this truth was more dangerous than any enemy he had faced. One by one the hunters shifted back, their confidence breaking under the weight of the chant, their eyes darting to the leader for guidance. But the leader gave none, his heart heavy with conflict. His pride told him to attack, his instinct told him to retreat. Yet both choices tasted like ash, for he understood that whatever path they chose, the galaxy had already changed. The word pack would echo beyond this forest, and once spoken it could not be taken back. It would grow, it would spread, and it would haunt them forever. The younger hunter at the edge snarled again, trying to summon courage. He crouched low, claws ready, eyes locked on the human, but the cubs lifted their heads and chanted louder, their small voices sharp as arrows. Pack, pack, pack. The sound rolled across the cliffs like a storm. The younger hunter's knees shook, his claws trembled, and when he tried to leap he stumbled instead, crashing against the stone, his body betraying him before the human ever raised a hand. Shame burned through him as his fellows looked away, unwilling to share his humiliation. The leader watched all of this with a heavy gaze. He felt the moment stretch long, endless, the forest silent except for the chant, the fire bright against the dark, and the human standing still at the center, her presence greater than her size, her calmness stronger than the hunter's blades. He felt the truth press upon him like a weight he could not lift, and though his pride screamed at him to strike, his heart whispered that the first move would be the end of them all. And for the first time in his life, the leader of predators hesitated. The cubs pressed closer to the human, their chant growing softer now, but steadier. The night air trembled with their loyalty. The hunters above stared down in silence, unable to move forward, unable to turn away, trapped between hunger and fear, trapped between instinct and truth, and the forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next move, waiting for the next heartbeat, for the moment when hesitation would break and the balance would shatter into violence or retreat. And so the hunters stood frozen on the cliffs, their blades shaking in their hands, their eyes fixed on the human below. And though none of them spoke, each one felt the same truth inside, that this was not prey, that this was not weakness, that this was the beginning of something they did not yet understand, and that something terrified them more than death itself. The forest was silent as if the air itself waited for a single heartbeat to break the tension. The moonlight spilled through the branches like silver spears and painted long shadows over the ground. The hunters above still hesitated, though their claws itched for blood, and the cubs pressed closer to the human, with wide eyes full of trust. The chant of pack still echoed in the night, though softer now, like the steady breath of something that refused to die. The young hunter who had stumbled before now rose again, shame burning through his chest. His body shook with both rage and fear. He wanted to prove himself to his leader, to his clan, and above all to himself. He wanted to show that a human was nothing more than fragile prey. He crouched once more and prepared to leap. The cub stiffened at his movement, but the human did not. She did not raise her hand. She did not reach for any weapon. She simply stood as though her stillness itself was a shield. The air grew heavy as the hunter dropped from the cliff like a falling stone. His claws aimed for her heart. The cubs squealed but did not scatter. Instead, they stepped in front of her tiny bodies, blocking his path. Their bravery shocked him and made his strike falter for the smallest moment. And in that smallest moment the human moved. She did not retreat. She did not hide. She stepped forward slow and calm, her eyes like frozen fire, her voice a whisper too soft for the hunters above but sharp enough to ignite the cubs around her. The cubs roared though their voices were high and small. They threw themselves at the hunter with wild courage, their tiny claws striking his armor with desperate fury. He snarled and swatted them aside, but they returned again and again. Their loyalty made his strength feel heavy, as if he carried a mountain on his shoulders. And all the while the human stood still, her body calm, her breath steady, her presence unshaken. She watched the hunter struggle, not against her, but against the unity she had built. The leader on the cliff felt his chest grow tight. His eyes narrowed as he watched the young one falter against cubs that should have been nothing. He whispered that it was impossible, that no human could inspire such madness. Yet he could not deny what he saw. The cubs were not fighting for survival. They were fighting for her. They fought as if their own lives meant nothing so long as she lived. And that kind of loyalty was more dangerous than claws or teeth. It was the kind of loyalty that created legends. The human finally moved, her hand rising not in violence but in calm direction. Her eyes never left the hunter as she guided the cubs, with only a glance. They shifted with her like water flowing with the river. Their movements clumsy but united. They struck when she stepped. They pulled back when she leaned. And the hunter felt himself drowning in a tide he could not predict. He swung wildly, but his claws met only shadows. His body grew heavy with doubt, and for the first time in his life he wondered if prey could truly be stronger than predator. The human's whisper came again, softer than wind. The cubs answered with voices louder than drums. Pack. The sound rolled over the clearing and pressed against the hearts of every hunter above. The leader gripped his blade tighter, but still did not descend. His pride screamed at him to end this foolishness, yet his instinct screamed louder that to attack now would mean ruin. He had led hunts against beasts that crushed mountains, against machines that spat fire, but never had he felt fear like this, fear born out of strength, but of something he could not pierce with steel. The young hunter below tried once more to lunge at the human, but her eyes met his and froze him in place. He saw no fear in those eyes, no plea for mercy, no weakness, only stillness, stillness that carried the weight of storms, stillness that broke his confidence more than any weapon could. He staggered back as if struck though she had not touched him. The cubs pressed forward as if they were her blades, their voices rising, pack, 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 and the sound crushed his will until his claws shook and his knees bent. The hunters above murmured in disbelief. Some hissed that the young one was weak. Others whispered that the human carried some hidden power. One even dared to say perhaps humans were never prey. Perhaps they were something else. The leader silenced them with a snarl, but his own heart echoed the same question. He could not deny the truth before his eyes. The human had not lifted a single weapon, had not shed a single drop of blood, yet she had broken the will of one of his warriors. She had turned cubs into soldiers with nothing but her presence. The firelight flickered higher as if feeding on the tension. Shadows danced across the trees like restless spirits. The human stood unmoving, her hand still on the smallest cub's shoulder. The cub pressed against her leg without fear. The hunter before her sank to his knees, with a growl that sounded more like despair than rage, and the chant of pack filled the night, until even the stars above seemed to listen. The leader felt his chest grow heavy with a truth he did not want, a truth that whispered humans were not prey at all. Humans were the seed of something larger. The silence stretched long and heavy after the young hunter fell back. He tried to rise, but his strength betrayed him. The cubs circled him like guardians. their tiny bodies fierce as stone. And the human finally knelt. She placed her hand on his weapon and pushed it gently to the ground. She whispered words too soft to understand, but whatever she said made the cubs nod as though they had been given command, and the hunter looked up at her with trembling eyes. He felt the weight of her calm press into his bones, and he knew he could not strike again. The hunters on the cliff began to argue in low growls. Some demanded to leap and crush her before her influence grew. Others demanded retreat before their pride turned to ruin. The leader listened but spoke nothing, for his thoughts were heavy with visions of what this meant. He thought of worlds where humans walked and wondered how many others had been called pack. He thought of battles where humans fought and wondered how many had turned defeat into survival by sheer will. He thought of his own people and wondered if even they could resist such a force. The cubs lifted their voices again. Pack, pack, pack. Their sound echoed across the cliffs and through the trees. It was no longer the cry of children. It was the chant of warriors who knew their place. Their place was with her, the human who stood still as the storm circled around her. The hunters felt the chant inside their veins like fire. It burned away certainty and left only questions, questions that tasted like fear, questions that tasted like the beginning of something they could not control. The leader closed his eyes for a breath, his claws trembling though he tried to hide it. He opened them again and met the gaze of the human below. She did not smile. She did not threaten. She only looked at him as if she had already won, as if she knew the forest had chosen its side, as if she knew the word pack was no longer hers alone, but belonged to the night itself. The leader clenched his jaw, and for the first time in his long life, he wondered if the hunt had turned against him. Oh! The young hunter who had fallen crawled back toward his clan, with shame heavy in his eyes. He could not meet their gaze. He could not raise his weapon again. And the cubs did not chase him. They simply returned to the human side, their loyalty unbroken, their chant steady. The hunters above felt the shift. They felt the line between predator and prey blur until they no longer knew which side they stood on, and in that blur lay danger greater than any blade. For if humans could stand still and break predators without moving, what else could they do? The night grew deeper as the fire burned on. The forest leaned close as if to listen. The hunters waited for their leader to command. The cubs clung tighter to the human, and she remained still, calm, unmoving, her silence heavier than words, her presence stronger than weapons, and the chant of pack continued until it filled every breath, every shadow, every corner of the night. The leader's heart knew the truth, though his pride fought against it, and that truth was that humanity had just shown a power no predator could destroy. The forest held its breath as the tension stretched across the night like a drawn bowstring. The cubs pressed close to the human, their small bodies trembling yet their eyes shining with courage. The hunters above the cliffs could no longer contain themselves. Whispers turned to growls, growls turned to roars, and finally the leader raised his blade high. His command was clear without words. Strike, and the hunters leapt down from the cliffs like shadows torn from the stars. The ground shook as their bodies landed in a circle around the fire. Claws gleamed, fangs bared, and hunger burned in their eyes. Yet even as their numbers closed and the human did not run, she did not flinch. She stood at the center with the cubs at her side, her calmness more terrifying than any weapon. The cubs lifted their voices again. Pack, pack, pack. The sound rolled like thunder. It shook the hearts of predators who had never before known fear. And still the human remained still until the first hunter lunged. His claws cut through the firelight. His snarl tore through the silence. He expected her to fall. He expected her to scream. But she moved with sudden precision. Her body bent just enough. Her arm rose like iron, and she struck his side with the edge of her hand. The sound of impact echoed across the trees. The hunter staggered with shock, his strength broken not by force but by timing. The cubs cried out with joy. Their chant louder, pack, 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 and the other hunters felt their confidence falter. The clash erupted in a storm of claws, teeth, and firelight. Predators charged from every side, yet the human moved with uncanny rhythm. Every strike she made was small but sharp. Every step she took was slow but sure. The cubs followed her motions as though their tiny bodies were bound to her by invisible threads. When she stepped forward, they pushed too. When she pulled back, they mirrored her. and together they became a tide that flowed against the hunter's fury. Their small voices carried through the chaos, pack, 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 and the forest echoed it back like a drumbeat of war. The leader growled as he swung his blade, his strength shaking the earth, but even his might could not land clean. The human slid aside, her hand guiding a cub to safety, her eyes never blinking, her breath never quickening. It was not rage that drove her. It was something colder, something steadier, and the hunters felt the weight of that cold calm press against them with every clash. Their strikes lost focus, their hearts grew uncertain, and they realized they were no longer hunting. They were being tested. The young hunter who had failed before tried to redeem himself. He lunged once more with all his strength. But this time the cubs did not merely block. They struck him first, their small claws raking his arms, their bodies striking like stones, their courage stronger than their weakness. And he stumbled again, shame flooding him as the chant surrounded him. Pack, pack, pack. The sound seemed to claw at his mind until he could barely lift his blade. He looked at the human and felt something no predator ever wished to feel, respect mixed with dread. The forest came alive with the sound of battle. Branches shook as birds scattered into the sky. The fire cracked and threw sparks into the air like stars, and still the human fought without frenzy. Every move exact, every gesture commanding. Her stillness at the heart of the storm made the cubs braver. It made the hunters weaker. They could not understand how prey could lead. They could not understand how prey could turn children into warriors. And with each passing heartbeat they felt themselves unraveling. The leader roared in fury, his pride wounded deeper than his flesh. He drove forward with a slash meant to tear the human apart. Yet she met his charge with nothing but a shift of her weight. The cubs darted in at her silent command, striking at his legs, biting at his arms. His swing slowed, his aim faltered, and she stepped inside his guard with a strike so simple it looked like nothing. Yet it forced him to stumble, his blade nearly falling from his hand. His warriors froze at the sight, for never had they seen their leader lose balance. The cubs cried out again, pack, 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 and their chant was no longer soft. It was fierce, it was triumphant. It was the cry of a bond unbreakable. The hunters faltered one by one, their claws slowing, their eyes darting in doubt. They were predators of countless worlds, yet they had never faced prey that refused to break, prey that stood still at the center of chaos, prey that turned weakness into strength. The leader bared his fangs and growled, but his heart was shaking. He knew his clan had already lost something more important than the battle. They had lost certainty. Blood touched the ground, but it was not human blood. It dripped from the wounds of hunters who had underestimated her, from the scratches of cubs who should have been helpless. The sight of it spread unease like fire through dry grass, and still the human skin remained unbroken, her breath steady, her eyes sharp, her hand guiding the cubs with every motion. It was not the strength of one body that fought them. It was the strength of unity. It was the strength of pack, and that was a power they had no answer for. The forest seemed to roar with the chant, every tree swaying, every stone vibrating. The hunters tried to gather themselves for one final strike. They thought if they moved as one they could overwhelm her. They thought if they used their numbers they could crush the strange bond she had built. But when they lunged together, the cubs lunged too, their voices sharp, their small claws wild, and the human moved with them like a storm guiding the wind. Their bodies became one rhythm, one breath, one strike, and the hunters broke against it like waves against rock. The leader staggered back with fury burning in his eyes, his warriors bruised and shaken, his pride torn apart by the sight of prey refusing to fall. He wanted to call retreat, yet his pride forbade it. He wanted to call attack, yet his instinct screamed against it. His heart raged with confusion, for he understood now that what he faced was not a human alone. It was something larger, something that could not be killed with steel. He faced a force born from a single word whispered in the dark. Pack, and that word had already changed everything. The cubs pressed close to the human once more, their small bodies tired yet unbroken, their chant softer now, but still steady. The hunters around them circled with hesitation, their claws shaking, their breaths ragged, and in that silence after the storm the human rose straight again, her eyes fixed on the leader. She said nothing, but her presence spoke louder than any voice. Her stillness told him the truth, that he had already lost. that his clan had already lost, and the chant of pack sealed. The forest itself echoing it back, until even the stars above seemed to whisper it. The leader's claws trembled as he lifted his blade again. His warriors looked to him with fear, not pride. His heart screamed that to attack again was to die. Yet his pride chained him in place. He stood there staring at the human who stood so still, so calm, so unshaken, and he felt the weight of the future pressing upon him. A future where humans would not just survive. A future where humans would spread this bond across worlds. A future where the word pack would haunt every predator who had ever thought themselves unchallenged. And so the night ended not in triumph for the hunters, but in silence heavy as iron. The fire still burned. The cubs still clung to her. The humans still stood at the center of it all. And the predators realized that the first clash had not been about blood. It had been about truth. The truth that humans were never truly alone. The truth that humans carried a power no blade could cut. The truth that the galaxy itself would soon learn, for the chant of pack was only beginning. The air in the forest grew heavy after the clash. Smoke from the fire curled upward, like twisting hands of ghosts. The predators stood in a loose ring around the human and the cubs, yet none dared to lunge again. Their claws dripped with their own blood. Their breaths came ragged. Their hearts beat unevenly. And for the first time since they had begun hunting across the stars, they felt the edge of fear. Not the kind of fear that came from teeth or claws or fire, but the kind that came from something unseen, something they could not crush. The human stood in the center calm as stone. Her chest rose and fell with steady rhythm. Her eyes never looked away from the hunters. Her hand still rested lightly on the shoulder of the smallest cub. The cubs were tired, yet their voices whispered still. Pack, pack, pack. Their chant now soft but strong like an ember glowing in the ashes of a dying fire. And that ember spread through the forest as if the earth itself had taken the word into its heart. The predators shifted nervously, their feet scraping the dirt, their eyes flicking from shadow to shadow. The leader growled though his throat was tight. His pride roared that he must finish this. His instinct screamed that he could not. His blade felt heavier than iron. His shoulders ached as though unseen hands pressed him down. He remembered the stories told by old warriors, stories he had once dismissed as exaggerations, tales of humans who survived when entire armies had fallen, tales of humans who formed bonds with strangers so strong that enemies had turned against their own, tales of humans who built packs not from blood but from loyalty. He had laughed once at such stories, but tonight he could not laugh. His warriors whispered among themselves though they tried to keep their voices low. Some asked why the cubs had not run. Some asked why the cubs fought with her. Others asked what power could make children defend prey. Their questions were sharp as knives, their doubt thicker than smoke, and doubt was poison for predators who relied on certainty. The leader bared his teeth, but could not silence them. The whispers grew heavier, the scent of fear stronger. The clan that had hunted beasts across galaxies now trembled at the sight of one human standing still with cubs at her side. The cubs pressed tighter around her, their eyes glowing in the firelight, their tiny bodies trembling yet unbroken. Every whisper of pack steadied them more, and the hunters felt the chant sink into their bones, whether they wished it or not. It coiled around their hearts like chains. It made them wonder if perhaps this was no human trick, but something older, something natural, the truth of survival itself made flesh. The bond that prey had always needed but had never spoken aloud until now. And in that word lay the secret that turned predators into cowards. One hunter finally snarled and broke from the ring, his rage stronger than his fear. He charged with claws raised high. He wanted to tear the word from the air, to silence the chant forever. His leap was swift, his roar thundered, but before he could land the cubs moved again, not scattered, not broken. They moved as one body. Their small claws scratched his arms. Their voices screamed the chant into his ears. Pack, pack, pack. He faltered mid-strike, and the human stepped forward with the same cold calm. One strike to his chest, not strong enough to kill, but strong enough to break his balance. He fell back into the dirt, gasping for breath. The circle of hunters recoiled, disbelief shining in their eyes. The human had struck again without frenzy, without rage, only precise motion. And again the cubs had fought like they were extensions of her will. Fear rippled through the group. Their snarls grew weaker. Their eyes darted not to their prey, but to each other, searching for courage that would not come. The leader snarled louder, his pride burning like fire, yet even his voice could not restore their strength. For what they had seen was not luck, it was bond, it was pack. The forest itself seemed to rise with the chant. Branches creaked, leaves shivered, even the soil vibrated under their feet. The predators shifted nervously. They had fought storms and beasts and machines, but this was different. Storms could be waited out, beasts could be slain, machines could be destroyed, but a bond like this could not be broken. It was not flesh to cut. It was not armor to pierce. It was not fear to exploit. It was something deeper. It was unity, and unity made their claws feel useless. The leader felt sweat trickle beneath his armor. His claws trembled, though he fought to keep them still. His warriors looked at him not with pride, but with doubt. Their eyes asked questions he could not answer. Their silence accused him of bringing them into a fight they could not win. He roared again and lifted his blade, but no one moved with him. The chant of pack drowned his command. The cubs raised their voices louder. The human did not need to shout. Her stillness carried more power than any roar. And the hunters realized with growing dread that they were the ones being hunted now. One hunter whispered that they should retreat. Another hissed that to retreat would mean shame forever. Another said shame was better than death. Their voices cracked under the weight of fear. The leader knew their hearts were breaking. He knew fear, once inside, could not be removed. He tried to raise his pride higher than their doubt, but even he felt the truth. His pride was ash, his certainty dust, and all that remained was the echo of the chant, pack, 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 circling his thoughts until it was louder than his own roar. The cubs lifted their tiny hands as if in defiance of the entire clan. Their small bodies glowed with firelight. Their eyes burned with loyalty. The hunters shifted back another step without meaning to, and in that moment the leader understood his worst fear. He understood that fear had won, not the fear of claws, not the fear of death, but the fear of a truth that could not be slain, the truth that humans were not alone, the truth that wherever they went they created something larger than themselves, something that even predators could not face without trembling. The human finally spoke, her voice low, steady, her words unknown to the hunters, but the cubs answered in their tongue, pack, 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 and the sound rolled like thunder. The hunters felt the ground beneath them shake, as though the very world had chosen a side, and they realized that their choice no longer mattered. The forest, the cubs, the night, even the silence itself belonged to her now, belonged to the human who stood without fear, who fought without frenzy, who led without command, who embodied the one force predators had never understood, unity. The leader looked into her eyes and felt his chest tighten. He saw no rage, no hatred, no joy, only certainty, and certainty was the one weapon that could cut deeper than any blade. He knew that if he struck again it would not matter. If he killed her the word would remain. The cubs would carry it. The forest would carry it. The galaxy would carry it. The word would spread like fire in dry fields, and predators would never hunt without hearing it whispering behind them, pack, pack, pack. His warriors shifted again, their eyes begging him to retreat, their claws lowered, their breath shallow. The leader snarled, but his body betrayed him. He stepped back, just one step, yet that one step carried the weight of defeat. The cubs saw it, the humans saw it, and the chant rose louder as though victory had already been won. The hunters hissed in shame, but none stepped forward again. Fear had wrapped itself around them. Fear had stripped them of their pride. Fear had marked them forever. And so the predators stood in silence, their bodies trembling, their hearts broken, while the human remained calm. The cubs remained loyal, and the word pack echoed through the forest like the voice of the stars themselves. The hunters knew then that they had witnessed the beginning of something greater than themselves, something that would haunt them across the galaxy, something that no amount of blood could erase. The power of a human standing still, the power of prey that refused to break, the power of pack. The night was heavy with silence after the predator stepped back. The fire burned low, yet its glow painted the human and the cubs in light that looked unshaken. The hunters circled but did not strike. Their claws hung limp, though their eyes still burned with hunger. Their pride screamed for attack, yet their instincts whispered louder of danger. And in that silence another sound broke through, a growl low and harsh, a sound not from human lips and not from cub throats, a sound that froze even the fiercest predator where he stood. From the shadows between the trees something moved, small but filled with weight, its body scarred and its eyes like burning embers. It stepped into the firelight with claws scratching the soil, its teeth bare in a snarl that carried no fear. The hunters stared in disbelief, for beside the human walked a beast unlike any they had seen, small compared to them, yet carrying a presence that pressed heavier than mountains. The cubs cheered as though welcoming an old protector, and the human bent her hand slowly toward the creature, her fingers brushing its fur like greeting family. The honey badger stood beside her, its back arched, its fur bristling, its growl vibrating through the ground itself. It was no larger than a predator's arm, yet the courage that radiated from it filled the clearing like fire. The hunters shifted in unease, for they had faced beasts of titanic size that had fallen under their claws, but never had they felt this kind of weight from something so small. The leader bared his teeth and hissed that it was nothing, that it was prey no different than the rest, yet even his own voice trembled. The cubs pressed closer to the human and the beast, their chant rising again, pack, 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 and the honey badger seemed to answer with its own growl, as though it knew the word belonged to it as much as to the human. The predator's heart sank, for now the pack was no longer just human and cubs. It was human and cubs and beast, a circle of belonging that grew wider with each heartbeat, a circle that pushed against their courage until cracks spread through it. One hunter dared to laugh, though the sound shook in his throat. He mocked the sight of a small beast standing against warriors who had slain titans. Yet his laugh ended when the honey badger's eyes met his. In that gaze he saw something he did not understand, something that felt like defiance sharpened into a blade. His claws loosened without his will. His breath caught, as if invisible hands squeezed his chest, and he stepped back despite his words of mockery, his pride shattered by a glance from something that by all reason should have been beneath him. The leader roared with anger at his warrior's weakness. He lifted his blade high and ordered them all forward. His pride demanded they crush this strange pack before its shadow grew larger. He leapt with fury. His warriors followed. The clearing erupted with movement, claws flashing, teeth snapping, roars thundering. Yet the human did not flinch. The cubs did not scatter. The honey badger launched forward like a bolt of fury, and in an instant the storm became chaos beyond their control. The honey badger struck the first warrior with a ferocity that no one could believe. Its teeth sank into his arm. Its claws tore through his armor like brittle bark. He screamed and staggered. Blood sprayed across the dirt. The beast did not let go. Its growl filled the air, and the hunters froze with disbelief. This was not prey. This was madness. This was defiance given form. They tried to swat it aside, but its body twisted with savage rhythm. Every strike they made drew blood from themselves instead of it, and their confidence crumbled. The human moved with the beast as though they had always fought together. Her strikes were cold, precise, not wild but exact. The cubs darted around them like sparks from the fire, their voices never stopping. Pack, pack, pack. The word mixed with the roar of the honey badger until it sounded like the chant of the forest itself. The hunters found themselves surrounded not by numbers, but by unity, a unity that broke their hearts and slowed their claws. For each time they struck, they faced not one enemy but all, and their strength faltered. The leader swung his blade with rage, aiming for the human, but the honey badger leapt onto him with impossible force. Its teeth bit into his shoulder. His roar shook the forest. His knees buckled. His warriors tried to help, but the cubs blocked them with desperate fury. The human stepped forward and struck his chest with her palm. The impact pushed him back further. His blade fell from his hand, and the chant grew louder, pack, 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 echoing until even the stars above seemed to whisper. The hunters staggered, their pride bleeding faster than their wounds. They could not understand how prey fought like this, how prey refused to break, how prey commanded loyalty so fierce that even a small beast fought like a god of war. They stepped back again, their growls thin, their claws dripping, fear spreading like sickness. They looked at their leader and saw weakness. They looked at the human and saw certainty, and the weight of that truth broke them more than any wound. The honey badger stood in the center of the circle, its body shaking with fury, but its eyes alive with fire, its growl never fading, its fur stained with blood that was not its own. The cubs clung to the human's legs, yet still raised their voices. Pack, pack, pack. The hunters heard it echo in their minds until it drowned out their pride, until it drowned out their courage, until all they could feel was fear. Fear of a bond they could not shatter. Fear of a truth they could not deny. The leader tried to rise, his body torn, his pride shattered. He roared one last time, but the sound carried no strength. The honey badger snarled louder. The cubs shouted their chant louder. The human stood still with eyes colder than any blade, and the hunters realized the storm was not theirs. The storm belonged to her, to the cubs, to the beast, to the word that would haunt them forever. Pack, pack, pack. They had come to hunt prey, but they had found a force no predator could defeat. One by one the hunters stepped back, their claws lowering, their hearts broken, shame burning in their eyes. They wanted to strike again, but their bodies would not move. They wanted to roar, but their throats would not open. They wanted to believe they were still hunters, but the truth pressed too heavy. They were no longer predators. They were shadows standing in the presence of something greater, and they knew if they remained they would be destroyed not by claw or blade, but by the weight of a word that would never die. The leader collapsed to his knees, blood dripping from his wounds, his eyes locked on the human, who had never once screamed, never once begged, never once fled. She had stood still while the storm raged, and now she stood victorious, without raising her voice. The honey badger at her side, the cubs at her feet, the chant of pack in the air. He lowered his head in defeat, though his pride howled. He knew his clan would never be the same. He knew the galaxy would never be the same. He knew humanity had just shown its truth. The predators slowly retreated into the shadows of the trees, their bodies broken, their pride shattered, their fear heavier than chains. They vanished into the night, but the chant followed them. It clung to their ears. It beat in their hearts. Pack, pack, pack. And they knew it would follow them forever. They knew they would whisper it in their dreams. They knew they would hear it in their nightmares. They knew they would never forget the night when prey became predator and predator became afraid. The fire burned low. The cubs pressed close to the human. The honey badger licked its wounds with steady calm, and the human looked at the forest with eyes that saw far beyond the trees. She had not only survived, she had shown a truth that spread like fire. The truth that humanity was never alone. The truth that wherever humans walked they would build a pack, and that pack would fight as one, no matter how small, no matter how weak, no matter how hopeless, and no predator could ever break it. The forest floor was red with blood, yet none of it belonged to the human. The cubs clung to her legs, their bodies weary, but their eyes alive with fire. The honey badger stood snarling beside her, its fur bristling, its claws still wet with the blood of predators who had thought themselves eternal. The hunters had fled into the dark, their shadows swallowed by trees, yet their fear lingered behind like smoke. The chant of pack still echoed through the clearing, as if the trees themselves whispered it. Back, pack, pack, pack. The human breathed slow, her shoulders steady, her gaze unbroken. She had not needed armor nor steel nor numbers. She had only needed calm and unity. The cubs pressed close and whispered again. Their voices carried through the night. Pack. The word was soft yet stronger than iron, and though the predators had vanished, the silence of the forest carried the memory of their defeat. Silence heavy and eternal. Silence that spoke of truth. The leader of the predators stumbled deeper into the shadows, his wounds heavy, his pride shattered. He could still hear the chant following him like a curse. Every step he took the word pressed harder against his chest. Pack, pack, pack. His warriors trailed behind, their claws dragging in shame. None of them dared to speak. None of them dared to look back, for they knew if they looked they would see her still standing, her eyes burning, her pack unbroken, and they could not face it. They could not face the truth. The cubs sat at the human's feet now, their voices softer. They leaned against her with the tired weight of children who had given everything. She touched their heads, gently, her calm presence wrapping around them like warmth. The honey badger growled once more at the forest, as if daring anything else to challenge them. Then it settled at her side like a silent guardian, its eyes never closing, its spirit never bending. It too was pack, and the predators would never forget it. The night stretched long, the stars above watching in silence, and within that silence the lesson of pack grew louder than any roar. The cubs had seen it, the predators had felt it, and the human knew it. Unity was stronger than hunger. Belonging was stronger than fear. Loyalty was stronger than claws. The galaxy had always believed that power came from sharp teeth and strong blades. But tonight it had been shown that true power came from standing together, from never breaking, from being pack. The forest itself seemed to bow to this truth. The trees swayed though no wind moved. The ground trembled as if remembering. Even the fire leaned forward, casting brighter light upon her face. The cubs whispered pack with every breath, their voices too small to shake the galaxy, yet strong enough to begin, strong enough to spread. For words did not need armies to conquer. They only needed hearts to believe. And tonight the hearts of cubs had believed, and through them the word would grow. Far away the hunters stumbled into their camp, their eyes hollow, their voices broken. Other clans asked what had happened, why their blades dripped with their own blood, why their shoulders slumped, and the leader whispered only one word, pack. The others did not understand, but they felt the weight of it in his tone. They felt the fear hidden in his throat. They asked no more questions, for they saw that something greater than battle had struck him, something that could not be healed with rest or silence, something that would follow forever. The cubs looked at the human with all their loyalty now sealed beyond blood. She had not only saved them, she had taught them. She had shown that family was not bound by flesh, but by choice. And in their young eyes the word pack became sacred. They would carry it to their kind. They would teach it to others. And slowly the galaxy would begin to hear it, whisper by whisper, chant by chant, until even the strongest predators would tremble when they heard it in the dark. The honey badger raised its head and growled toward the stars. The sound rolled through the forest like thunder. The cubs cheered in answer, their voices rising once more. Pack, pack, pack. The chant grew until the trees shook, until the fire flared, until the air itself seemed alive, and the human stood among them like the center of a storm, calm yet unyielding, silent yet commanding, still yet unbreakable. Her presence spoke the truth without words. Humanity was not alone. Humanity would never be alone. Humanity was pack. The predators who had fled sat in silence around their dim fires, each one haunted by the memory of that chant, each one haunted by the way their claws had faltered, each one haunted by the way their leader had fallen. They had faced countless enemies across the stars, yet none had broken them like this. None had made them question their place like this. They whispered among themselves, yet every whisper circled back to the same word, pack, and the word tasted like ash in their mouths, bitter and eternal. The leader of the hunters lifted his eyes to the stars, and for the first time in his life, felt the weight of defeat. Not the defeat of battle, but the defeat of truth. He knew that if one human could do this, then many could do worse. If one human could build a pack among alien cubs, then what could an army of humans build? What could a world of humans create? His claws shook at the thought. His heart sank. His pride wept, and he whispered to himself that predators had not seen the end tonight. They had seen the beginning. The cubs finally fell asleep against the human, their small bodies curled like shadows around her legs. She did not move. She stood watching the forest, her eyes sharp. The honey badger remained awake, its body tense, its snarl low. And in that silent clearing the future of the galaxy shifted. Predators had believed themselves untouchable. Yet now they knew they had touched something stronger, something that no claw could cut, something that no hunger could devour, the lesson of pack. The night deepened, the stars burned brighter, the forest grew quiet, and in that quiet the human closed her eyes for just a moment, her breath steady, her body calm. She did not need to say anything. The cubs had already spoken, the forest had already listened, the predators had already learned, and the galaxy would soon hear, for the chant of pack would spread like fire across dry grass, unstoppable, undeniable, eternal, and those who once called themselves hunters would remember the night. They were hunted by a word, and so the story of the strange encounter did not end with blood nor with death. It ended with silence heavy as iron. It ended with predators retreating into shame. It ended with cubs sleeping in peace. It ended with a beast guarding like a shadow of fury. It ended with a human standing still in the center of it all. And from that ending a new beginning was born. The beginning of a truth that would shape the stars. The truth that humanity was never alone. The truth that humanity was always pack.